She called to return a wallet, unaware the driver was the mafia boss testing her. The rain in Briarhaven did not wash the city clean. It only seemed to make the grime slicker, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected the neon desperation of the downtown district. 24-year-old Maya Clark watched the windshield wipers of her sedan slap back and forth, a hypnotic rhythm that matched the dull throb behind her eyes. It was 2 a.m. Her day had started 19 hours ago at Harbor Brew, where the scent of roasted beans and scalded milk had permeated her clothes, her hair, and seemingly her pores. After an 8-hour shift on her feet, serving lattes to impatients in business suits, she had traded her apron for the keys to her aging sedan, logging into the rideshare app to chase the surge pricing that accompanied the storm. She shifted in the driver's seat, trying to stretch a cramp out of her lower back. The car smelled faintly of the pine air freshener she bought in bulk and the damp wool of her last passenger's coat. Every mile she drove was a calculation. 3 miles meant a gallon of gas. 2 rides meant she could cover the minimum payment on the credit card she had maxed out for her mother's hospice care. 4 hours of driving meant she might be able to afford groceries that were not instant noodles. The grief for her mother was a physical weight, a stone she carried in her chest that made breathing difficult, but the debt was a wolf snapping at her heels, forcing her to keep moving. Her phone pinged, signaling the end of her current ride. She pulled up to the curb outside the gilded entrance of the Grand Hotel. The awning provided a dry haven for the doorman, but the street was a river. "Thank you," she said, her voice raspy from disuse. The passenger, a quiet man in a charcoal suit who had spent the entire 20-minute ride staring out the window, merely nodded. He opened the door, letting in a gust of wind and rain, and stepped out. A woman who had been with him, equally silent and wrapped in expensive silk, followed. They vanished into the revolving doors of the hotel without a backward glance. Maya exhaled, leaning her head back against the headrest for a stolen second of rest. She needed to check the back seat. It was company policy, but more than that, it was habit. Drunks left phones, tourists left umbrellas. She twisted around, scanning the dark upholstery. There, wedged between the seatbelt buckle and the back cushion, sat a rectangle of dark leather. Maya frowned. She reached back, her fingers brushing against the object. It was heavy, much heavier than a normal wallet. She pulled it into the front seat and turned on the dome light. It was exquisite. The leather was soft, supple, and clearly Italian, the stitching precise. It felt warm in her hands. She hesitated, her heart doing a nervous flutter against her ribs. She should just report it in the app. That was the protocol. But her thumb slipped, and the wallet fell open. Maya stopped breathing. Thick stacks of currency filled the billfold. It was not just 20s or 10s. It was hundreds. Crisp, fresh $100 bills packed so tightly the leather strained to contain them. There had to be thousands of dollars here. 5,000, maybe 10. Her hands began to tremble. $10,000. The number screamed in her mind. That was 3 months of rent. It was the rest of the funeral costs. It was the terrifying medical collection notice she had shoved into a drawer unopened. It was freedom. It was sleep. She looked out the window. The street was empty. The rain blurred the world into gray and black. No one was watching. The passenger had not even looked at her. He was rich enough to stay at the Grand Hotel. He probably lost this kind of money in sofa cushions. "Take it," a desperate voice whispered in her ear. "You worked yourself to the bone while your mother faded away in a state-run hospital room because you could not afford better. The universe owes you this." Her fingers tightened on the leather. She could take the cash, toss the wallet in a storm drain, and drive away. No one would know. She could sleep for a week. She could finally breathe. She looked down at the wallet again. Tucked into a leather slot, in front of a row of platinum credit cards, was a business card. It was matte black with silver embossing, sleek and minimalist. N. Vescari Chauffeur Services, Private Transport Logistics. A phone number followed. No address, no email. Maya closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, thin and frail in that hospital bed, gripping Maya's hand with surprising strength. "Do not let the world make you hard." Maya, her mother, had whispered days before the end, "We do not become what hurt us. We keep our hands clean." A tear leaked out, hot against Maya's cold cheek. She dashed it away angrily. "I cannot do it," she whispered to the empty car. The universe might owe her. But she refused to steal her repayment. If she took this money, every time she bought food or paid a bill, she would remember the weight of the theft. She would be just another person in Briarhaven taking what wasn't hers. With a shaking hand, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the black card. It rang twice. "This is Nick," a voice answered. It was a low voice, baritone and smooth, but controlled. There was no sleep in it, despite the hour. It sounded alert, like a predator listening for a twig snap in the forest. "Hi," Maya said, hating how small her voice sounded. I think I just dropped you off. Or I dropped off a client of yours. I am a rideshare driver." There was a pause, a silence that felt heavy, as if he were assessing the frequency of her voice. "Is that so?" the man asked. "Yes. I found a wallet in my back seat. It has a card for Viscari chauffeur services in it." Another pause, then a sound that might have been a dry chuckle. "You called the number on the card?" "Yes," Maya said. "I did not want to leave it with the hotel front desk. It has a lot of cash in it. I did not trust it would get back to you intact. You are an honest woman." The man named Nick said. His tone shifted, becoming warmer. Though the underlying steel remained, most people would have taken a bonus for themselves and tossed the ID. "I am not most people," Maya said, her grip on the steering wheel tightening. "Look, I am done for the night. I am sitting at the gas station on 4th and Main, the one with the broken sign. If you want to come get it, I will wait 10 minutes. Otherwise, I am turning it in to the police precinct in the morning." "No police," he said instantly. The sharpness in his voice made her flinch. "I mean, do not trouble yourself with the paperwork. I am nearby. I will swing by and grab it." "Okay," Maya said. 4th and Main. I know where it is. Wait for me." The line went dead. Maya stared at the phone. The conversation had felt strange. He had not sounded panicked about losing thousands of dollars. He had sounded amused. She pulled her car under the flickering fluorescent awning of the gas station. The rain hammered against the metal roof, a deafening drum roll. She locked the doors and waited, the wallet sitting on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. 5 minutes later, headlights cut through the gloom. A car turned into the station lot. It was not a normal car. It was a long, black sedan, polished to a mirror shine despite the weather, with windows tinted so dark they looked like ink. It moved with a silent, predatory grace, the engine a low purr that vibrated in Maya's chest. It pulled up alongside her battered compact car. The driver's window did not roll down. Maya swallowed hard. Her instincts, honed by years of late-night driving, prickled. This did not feel like a chauffeur service. This felt like trouble. The back door of the sedan opened. A man stepped out. He was tall. That was her first impression. He unfolded himself from the car with an easy, athletic power. He wore a long, dark wool coat with the collar turned up against the wind, tailored to fit broad shoulders. Beneath it, she glimpsed a crisp white shirt and no tie. He did not look like a driver named Nick. He looked like the man who owned the city. He walked around the front of her car, ignoring the rain that plastered his dark hair to his forehead. He stopped by her window and tapped on the glass. Maya hesitated. She cracked the window 2 inches. "Nick?" she asked. The man smiled. It was a polite smile, but it did not reach his eyes. His eyes were gray, the color of the storm clouds above, and they swept over her face with unsettling intensity. "That is me," he said. "You are the one who called." Maya nodded. She grabbed the wallet and shoved it through the crack in the window. "Here." He took it, his long fingers brushing against the leather. He did not open it to check the money. He just held it, weighing it in his hand, his gaze still fixed on her. "You did not take anything," he stated. "It was not a question." "No." Maya said. "Why?" he asked softly. The wind howled around them, blowing rain under the awning, but his voice carried clearly. Maya blinked. "Excuse me?" I know how much is in here, he said. It is not a small amount. You are driving a car that is 5 years past its prime. Your tires are bald, and you look like you haven't slept in 2 days. Why did you not keep a little for yourself? No one would have known. The observation stung. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, a mix of shame and anger. He had dissected her life in 10 seconds. I do not steal, she said, her voice firming up. Everyone steals, Nick said, leaning closer to the glass. Time, opportunity, happiness. Money is the least of it. I told you, Maya said, her jaw setting. I am not everyone, and I owe the universe too much already. I do not need to add bad karma to the list. The man stared at her. For a moment, the mask of polite amusement slipped, revealing something sharper underneath. Curiosity. Genuine curiosity. You owe the universe, he repeated slowly, tasting the words. Maya reached for her gear shift. If you have your wallet, I'm gonna go. Wait. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a money clip. He peeled off several bills, hundreds, and tried to slide them through the crack in the window. For your trouble, he said. A reward. Maya looked at the money. It was right there. Easy. Just take it. She shook her head. No, take it, he insisted. You returned property. It is standard practice. I did not do it for a reward, she said, feeling that spike of stubborn pride that had always been her downfall and her salvation. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Keep your money. Nico Vescari paused. He held the bills there for another second, watching her. He saw the fraying collar of her jacket. He saw the dark circles under her amber eyes. And he saw a defiance that he had not encountered in a very long time. In his world. Everyone had a price. Everyone had a handout. This girl, with her tired eyes and her beat-up car, was looking at $500 and saying no. Slowly, he withdrew his hand. He tucked the money back into his pocket. You are a rare thing, he said quietly. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out another card. Identical to the first, he slid it through the window. It landed on her passenger seat. Keep the number, he said, in case your car breaks down, or you need a safe ride, or you decide the universe owes you a break. Maya looked at the card, then back at him. I have a car. Cars die, he said. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. He tapped the roof of her car twice with his palm, a gesture of dismissal and finality. Then he turned and walked back to the idling black sedan. Maya watched him go. As he opened the back door, the interior light of his car flashed on. She saw another man sitting in the front passenger seat, a burly figure with a thick neck, watching her with a scowl. The tall man, Nick, slid into the back, and the heavy door thudded shut. The sedan peeled away, merging into the rainy night like a shark slipping back into deep water. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Her hands were shaking again. She picked up the card he had dropped. It felt heavy, just like the wallet. She ran her thumb over the embossed letters. N. Vescari. Why did she feel like she had just survived something dangerous? As she put the car in drive, she could still feel the ghost of the sensation where his fingers had grazed hers during the wallet handoff. It was a jolt, like static electricity, but deeper. It settled in her stomach, a knot of heat that refused to dissolve. Inside the black sedan, the atmosphere was quiet and temperature-controlled, a stark contrast to the storm outside. Nico Vescari settled back into the leather seat, the wallet resting on his knee. He didn't open it. He knew exactly what was inside. He had instructed his men to put exactly $10,000 in it before planting it in the rideshare vehicle. The man in the front passenger seat, his head of security, Marco, turned around. Did she take any? Marco asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. Nico looked out the window at the receding lights of the gas station. No, not $1. She even refused the reward. Marco snorted. She's either a saint or a plant. My money is on plant. Probably working for the Moranos. Trying to get close to you, maybe, Nico murmured. He thought of her face, the exhaustion etched into the corners of her eyes, the way her chin had lifted when she refused the money. I owe the universe too much already. It was a strange thing to say. Run the file again, Nico said. his voice dropping to that low, lethal register that made his enemies sweat. "I want to know everything, debts, family, history. If she is a plant, she is the best actor I have ever seen." "I already pulled the basics," Marco said, tapping a tablet on his lap. "Maya Clark. Mother died 3 months ago. Cancer, left her with 6 figures of debt. She works 2 jobs, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. She was an art student before the bills started piling up." Nico listened, absorbing the data, desperate, grieving, drowning in debt. And yet, she had held $10,000 in her hand and given it back. "She's not a plant," Nico decided. "Then she is an idiot," Marco muttered. "Who gives back 10 grand? Someone with a moral compass we have not seen in this city since we were children," Nico said. He picked up the wallet and tapped it against his chin. He could still see her eyes, amber, fierce, and incredibly sad. He had expected her to steal the money. He had expected to track her down and use the theft as leverage, a way to own her if she proved useful. That was how the test worked. That was how he recruited the desperate. But she had flipped the script. She had surprised him, and Nico Viscari did not like being surprised, but he found he liked Maya Clark. "Keep eyes on her," Nico ordered. "You want a tail? I want to know when she is working. I want to know if anyone bothers her." Marco raised an eyebrow. "Boss?" "She refused the money," Nico said, a small, terrifying smile touching his lips as he looked at the rain streaking the glass. "That means she passed the test. Now, let us see what she does with the connection." He looked down at his hand, remembering the brief, accidental brush of her skin against his. It had been cold, wet from the rain, but it had sent a spark through him that he had not felt in years. Maya Clark went home to a studio apartment that smelled of damp drywall and loneliness. She threw her keys on the tiny laminate table and collapsed onto her mattress. Not bothering to change out of her clothes, she stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer against the single window. She should be relieved. She'd done the right thing. She'd kept her soul clean, just like her mother wanted. But as she closed her eyes, she did not see her mother's face. She saw him, Nick. The way he had stood in the rain, indifferent to the cold, the expensive cut of his coat, the way he had looked at her, as if he were reading a book in a language only he understood. I owe the universe too much. Why had she told him that? She never told anyone that. She rolled over, pulling her thin blanket up to her chin. The business card was sitting on the table where she had tossed it. She could see the silver lettering catching the stray light from the street lamp outside. N. Viscari. She had a feeling that returning that wallet had not ended the story. In the dark, with the sound of the storm surrounding her, Maya felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. It felt like she had walked up to the edge of a cliff in the fog, and she had no idea how far down the drop went. She closed her eyes, drifting into a fitful sleep, unaware that in a penthouse across the city, the man she knew as Nick was reading her name on a glowing screen, planning her future with the precision of a chess master moving a pawn. 3 days later, the reality of Maya's moral high ground crashed into the unforgiving concrete of her financial situation. The banging on her apartment door started at 8 in the morning, a rhythmic, heavy thudding that shook the peeling paint on the frame. Maya, who had only fallen asleep 4 hours prior after a closing shift, dragged herself out of bed. She knew who it was before she even checked the peephole. Mr. Henderson, her landlord. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarette smoke. Mr. Henderson stood there, a man shaped like a bulldog with a temperament to match. Clutching a clipboard, rent was due on the 1st. "Maya," he barked, not bothering with a greeting. "It is the 5th. I know." "Mr. Henderson," Maya said, clutching her robe tighter around her throat. "I get paid tomorrow." "I will have the money order for you by noon. You said that last month," he countered, his eyes narrowing. "I have a list of people waiting for a unit in this building. People who actually have the cash. If you do not have the full amount, plus the late fee, by tomorrow, I am starting the eviction process. You have 24 hours. He slapped a folded piece of paper against the doorframe, turned on his heel, and marched away. Maya closed the door and leaned her forehead against the cool wood. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She crawled over to her backpack and dumped the contents onto the floor. Crumpled $1 bills, a handful of quarters, and a few fives from her tip spilled out. She counted it, her hands shaking slightly. $42. She needed $800. For a torturous moment. Her mind flashed back to the rainy night at the gas station. She thought of the heavy leather wallet. She thought of the thick stack of $100 bills. She could have taken 5 bills. Just 5. Nico Vescari, Nick, the driver, would never have missed it. He probably blew that much on dinner. "You did the right thing," she whispered to the empty room, though the words tasted like ash. "You are not a thief." But pride did not pay for a roof over her head. Pride did not keep Mr. Henderson from throwing her meager belongings onto the sidewalk. She spent the rest of the morning in a haze of panic, listing items she could sell on marketplace apps. Her old laptop, maybe $50. Her mother's jewelry? No. She would live in her car before she sold the locket her mother had worn every day. By the time she clocked in at Harbor Brew for the evening shift, Maya felt brittle. She felt like a piece of glass that had been tapped one too many times, ready to shatter. The coffee shop was busy, filled with the post-work crowd seeking a caffeine jolt to power through evening deadlines. Maya moved on autopilot, steaming milk, pulling espresso shots, forcing a smile that made her facial muscles ache. Around 7 o'clock, a group of 4 men walked in. They were loud, wearing suits that cost more than Maya made in a year, smelling of expensive scotch and entitlement. They took up the large booth in the corner and spent 20 minutes debating their order while a line formed behind them. When Maya finally brought their drinks to the table, the man closest to the aisle, a guy with slicked-back blonde hair and a tie loosened at the collar, leered at her. "You look tired, sweetheart," he said, his eyes dropping to her name tag. "Maya, that is a pretty name. What time do you get off?" "I am working a double," Maya said, keeping her voice flat and professional. "Is there anything else I can get you?" "Just a smile," he said, grinning at his friends. "Come on, you look miserable." "Give us a smile." Maya took a step back. "I have other customers waiting." As she turned to leave, the man's hand shot out. He clamped his fingers around her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Do not be rude," he snapped, the playfulness vanishing. "I was just being nice." "Please let go of my arm," Maya said. The noise in the shop seemed to drop away. Her heart kicked into overdrive. She tried to pull her arm back, but he held fast, his thumb digging into her pulse point. "I think you owe me an apology for the attitude," the man sneered, emboldened by his friend's laughter. Suddenly, the air behind the man seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Let her go." The voice was not loud. It was not a shout. It was a low, resonant baritone that cut through the chatter of the coffee shop like a razor blade through silk. The man in the suit froze. He looked up. Standing behind him was Nico. He was wearing a dark charcoal coat over a black turtleneck, looking every inch the spectral figure he had been in the rain. He did not look angry. He looked bored. But it was the boredom of a tiger deciding which limb to tear off first. The man in the suit blinked, trying to regain his bravado. "Who are you?" "Her boyfriend. I am the man asking you nicely to remove your hand from the lady," Nico said. His gray eyes were flat, devoid of any light, "and I only ask nicely once." The man looked at Nico, then at his friends. He saw something in Nico's face, a promise of violence so absolute that it required no posturing that made his survival instincts kick in. His face paled. He released Maya's wrist as if it were red-hot iron. "My mistake," the man muttered, shrinking back into the booth. Nico did not move. He stood there for 3 long seconds, staring the man down until the guy looked away, staring intently at his coffee cup. Then, and only then, did Nico turn his attention to Maya. He stepped between her and the table, using his body as a shield. He did not touch her, but his hand hovered near her elbow, a protective arc of warmth. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice had lost the razor edge. It was soft now, intimate. Maya rubbed her wrist. There were red marks where the man's fingers had been. I am fine. He grabbed me. Go take a break, Nico said. I cannot, Maya argued, her voice trembling. My manager is in the back. I have a line. I will handle the line, Nico said. Go to the back. Breathe. She looked at him, bewildered by his command of the situation, but her legs felt like jelly. She nodded and slipped into the back room. When she came out, 10 minutes later, the group of men was gone. Their table was cleared. Nico was standing by the counter, sipping a black coffee, reading a newspaper he must have brought with him. He looked up as she approached. They left, she asked. They remembered they had an urgent appointment elsewhere, Nico said dryly. He folded the paper. When does your shift end? 10 minutes, she said. I will wait, he said. I am driving you home. Maya opened her mouth to argue, to say she had her car, but then she remembered she had walked to work to save gas. And after the adrenaline crash, the idea of walking 12 blocks in the dark was terrifying. Okay, she whispered. Thank you. 20 minutes later, she was sitting in the passenger seat of the black sedan. It smelled of leather and something distinct, cedar and rain, that she realized was Nico's scent. The city slipped by outside the tinted windows, a blur of lights. It was quiet inside the car, a cocoon of safety that felt dangerously seductive. You have a habit of showing up when I'm in trouble, Maya said, breaking the silence. Nico glanced at her, the dashboard lights casting shadows across the sharp planes of his face. Briarhaven is a city that likes to eat good people alive, he said quietly. Sometimes. The good people need someone to sharpen their teeth for them. Is that what you do? Maya asked. You sharpen teeth. I drive the car. Maya, he said, his eyes back on the road. I just observe. They turned a corner, the movement sharp, and Maya's knee bumped against his saws. The center console was low, the space intimate, the contact was brief, a mere brush of denim against wool trouser leg, but it sent a jolt of electricity straight up her spine. She pulled her leg back instinctively, but the ghost of the touch lingered. She looked at his hands on the steering wheel. They were large, capable hands. She remembered the way he had looked at the man in the coffee shop. Controlled, lethal. So, Nick the driver, she said, trying to lighten the mood. Do you drive for the Mafia or something? You scared that guy half to death without raising your voice. Nico laughed. It was a genuine sound, low and rich. Logistics, he said. I drive for high-end clients, executives, people who value privacy. You learn how to handle difficult personalities when you work in this industry. He paused, glancing at the red marks fading on her wrist. You look like you are carrying the weight of the world tonight, Maya. Maya looked out the window. It is just rent, bills, the usual. She did not want to tell him. She did not want his pity. But the silence in the car was so heavy, so listening, that the words spilled out. My landlord is threatening to evict me tomorrow if I do not come up with $800. I am working double shifts, but it is not catching up fast enough. She felt him look at her. I have an opening, he said. What? At the office, he said. My bookkeeping is a disaster. I drive. I handle clients. I do not like organizing receipts or handling the scheduling for the other drivers. I need someone organized, someone I can trust. Maya turned in her seat to face him. You are offering me a job? It is part-time, he said, shrugging as if it were no big deal. Flexible hours. You can do it in the evenings or whenever you have downtime. Mostly data entry. Some translation for clients who do not speak English well. I saw on your resume you speak Spanish? Wait. Maya frowned. You saw my resume. I looked you up after the wallet incident, he admitted without missing a beat. Standard security check. I cannot have people knowing my personal number if they are unreliable. The explanation was smooth, too smooth. Maya studied his profile. He was offering her a lifeline, a desperate, impossible lifeline. How much does it pay? She asked. $30 an hour, he said. Maya's jaw dropped. That was triple what she made at the coffee shop. That is a lot for data entry, she stammered. It is a lot for discretion. Nico corrected. "My clients value privacy. I need someone who keeps their head down and does the work. You proved you have integrity when you returned the wallet. That is worth paying for." They pulled up to the curb in front of her building. The neon sign of the liquor store across the street flickered, buzzing audibly. Nico put the car in park and turned to her. His arm rested on the back of the seat, his fingers inches from her shoulder. The air in the car suddenly felt very thin. "Think about it," he said. "You can start tomorrow. I can advance you the first week's pay to get your landlord off your back." Maya looked at him. His gray eyes were unreadable, but there was a softness there, buried deep. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you returned the wallet," he said simply, "and because I hate seeing bullies win." Torn between suspicion, it was too good to be true, and the terrifying reality of eviction. Maya made her choice. She nodded. "Okay," she said. "I will do it." "Good," Nico said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "Here, consider this a signing bonus. Use it for the rent." He handed it to her. It was thick. Maya took it, her fingers brushing his. The spark was there again. Hotter this time. "Thank you." "Nick," she whispered. "Be ready at 6 tomorrow evening," he said. "I will pick you up." Maya climbed out of the car, clutching the envelope to her chest. She watched him drive away, the taillights disappearing into the gloom. Inside the car, Nico watched her enter the building. He let out a long breath. He picked up his phone and dialed Marco. "She is in," Nico said. "Good," Marco's voice crackled. "But boss, bringing a civilian into the office, is that smart?" "She's not a civilian anymore," Nico said, his voice hardening. "She is mine." The next evening, Maya found herself standing in the lobby of a nondescript office building downtown. The directory listed Viscari Transport Logistics on the 12th floor. When the elevator doors opened, she expected a small, cluttered office. Instead, she stepped into a sleek, modern space with glass walls and polished concrete floors. It was quiet, humming with the sound of servers and low conversations. She walked to the reception desk. A large man in a security uniform looked up. He was not the typical sleepy security guard. He looked like he ate gym weights for breakfast. "I am here to see Nick," she said. The guard's eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Viscari is in the main office. Go right on back. Mr. Viscari." The deference in the guard's tone struck her. Maya walked down the hallway. She passed open doors where men in shirt sleeves were working on computers. They stopped talking as she passed, watching her with guarded curiosity. She reached the office at the end of the hall. The door was open. Nico was sitting behind a large mahogany desk, studying a map spread out across the surface. He looked up as she knocked on the glass. "Maya," he said, standing up. He buttoned his suit jacket, a reflex of formality. "You made it. It is bigger than I expected," she said, stepping inside. "We have been expanding," he said smoothly. He came around the desk. He seemed larger here, in his own territory. The authority that he usually kept under a layer of driver-like servitude was on full display. His nameplate on the desk said Nicholas Viscari, operations manager, but the way he moved suggested he owned the building. He showed her to a smaller desk in the corner of his office. There was a stack of receipts and a laptop waiting. "Simple stuff," he said. "Log the fuel expenses. Categorize the client dinners. If you see anything in Italian, leave it for me." Maya sat down and started working. It was legitimate work, if a bit repetitive. But as the hours passed, she noticed things. The amounts on the dinner receipts were astronomical. $3,000 for wine, $5,000 for a client entertainment fee. The names on the invoices were people she had heard mentioned on the news, sometimes connected to construction unions or waste management contracts. Curiosity gnawed at her, but she kept her head down. She needed this money. By 10 in the evening, the rest of the office had gone quiet. It was just the two of them in the room, the only light coming from her laptop screen and the desk lamp casting a warm pool of gold over Nico's workspace. The rain had started again outside, lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Maya stretched, rolling her neck. "Tired?" Nico asked. He was standing right behind her. She hadn't heard him move. She jumped slightly, spinning her chair around. He was leaning against the edge of her desk, his arms crossed over his chest. He had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a faint scar running down his left wrist. "A little," she admitted. "The numbers are starting to swim." He reached over, his hand resting on the desk near hers. He smelled of espresso and that distinct cedar scent. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You are doing good work," he said. "You caught that error in the fuel logs from last month. Most people would have missed it." "I am good with details," she said, her voice sounding breathless to her own ears. He leaned in closer to look at the screen, his breath warm against her ear. "I can see that." The atmosphere in the room shifted. It became heavy, charged with a tension that was thick enough to taste. Maya looked up at him. He was looking down at her, his gray eyes dark, the pupils blown wide. He was not looking at the screen. He was looking at her mouth. Maya's heart slammed against her ribs. She felt a magnetic pull, an undeniable urge to lean forward, to close the inches between them. Suddenly, a massive clap of thunder shook the building. The windows rattled in their frames. Maya gasped, flinching violently. Instinctively, Nico's hand shot out. He gripped her shoulder, his thumb digging in, grounding her. "It is okay," he murmured, "just the storm." His thumb began to rub slow, soothing circles against her collarbone, through the thin fabric of her blouse. It was a hypnotic, possessive touch. Maya looked up into his eyes. He was frozen, his hand still on her shoulder. The air between them crackled. He leaned down, just an inch. His gaze dropped to her lips again. Maya parted her lips, her breath hitching. She wanted him to kiss her. She wanted it more than she wanted to breathe, for a heartbeat. He hesitated. His mask of control slipped, revealing a raw, hungry need that terrified and thrilled her. Then he blinked. The mask slammed back into place. He straightened up abruptly, pulling his hand away as if he had been burned. "I should not," he muttered, his jaw tight. "We should not blur professional lines." He walked back to his side of the desk, turning his back to her to look out the window at the storm. "Go home, Maya," he said, his voice rough. "I will call you a car." Maya sat there for a moment, flushed and trembling, her skin burning where he had touched her. She felt rejected, frustrated, and confused. "Okay," she said quietly. "Good night, Nick." She gathered her things and left the office, walking past the security guard who watched her go with a knowing look. As she rode the elevator down, Maya touched her shoulder, closing her eyes. She knew, with a sinking feeling, that she was in trouble. Not financial trouble this time. She was falling for the driver. And upstairs, in the darkened office, Nico Vescari pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window, watching her leave, cursing himself for the weakness that made him want to keep her, even when he knew it would eventually destroy her. 2 weeks into her new role at Vescari Transport and Logistics, Maya Clark began to realize that the devil was not in the details, but in the silences between them. The job itself was exactly what Nico had promised: organizing receipts, digitizing handwritten logs, and occasionally translating correspondence from Italian suppliers who seemed to have a tenuous grasp of English grammar. The money was good. In fact, it was life-saving. For the first time in 3 years, Maya had paid her rent 5 days early. She'd even started chipping away at the mountain of medical debt that had loomed over her like a thunderhead since her mother's passing. But as the initial relief of financial stability faded, a creeping unease took its place. It started with the numbers. Maya was good at math. She had been studying art history, but she had managed the books for her uncle's hardware store in high school. She knew how a business ran. And Vescari Transport ran with a peculiar kind of liquidity. There were petty cash logs that listed withdrawals of $20,000 for miscellaneous consulting. There were invoices for concrete and steel that seemed vastly overpriced for a logistics company that supposedly only moved people in small parcels. Then there were the men. The office was always populated by men who did not look like office workers. They wore suits that were tailored a little too loosely around the chest and underarms, as if concealing something bulky. They walked with a heavy, deliberate cadence, scanning rooms before entering them. One Tuesday evening, Maya stayed late to finish filing a stack of fuel reports. The office was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound until the heavy glass door at the end of the hallway opened. She heard heavy footsteps and a voice she recognized as Marco, the head of security. "Boss, we have a problem with the union steward at the docks," Marco's voice rumbled, echoing slightly in the corridor. "He's asking for another 10%. Maya froze, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. She knew Nico was in his office. She had seen the light under his door. "Pay him," Nico's voice replied, smooth and unbothered. "He's getting greedy," Marco argued. "If we pay him, the others will want to cut. Then remind him why he holds that position," Nico said. His tone dropped, losing its professional polish and becoming something colder, something that made the hair on Maya's arms stand up. "Tell him accidents happen on wet pavement. He will understand." Maya stopped breathing. Accidents happen on wet pavement. It was a phrase that could mean anything, but in the context of the coldness in Nico's voice, it sounded like a death threat. She heard a door close, and silence returned. Maya stared at her computer screen, the numbers blurring. She tried to tell herself she was imagining things. It was a tough industry. Construction and logistics were cutthroat. Maybe that was just how men in this business talked, but the doubt had taken root, and it grew with every passing day. 2 nights later, the illusion shattered completely. Maya was working her shift at Harbor Brew. It was a slow Thursday, the rain once again turning Briarhaven into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. She was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. A man walked in. He looked like he had been worn down by the city itself. He wore a rumpled beige trench coat that had seen better decades, and his eyes were tired, set deep in a face lined with cynicism. He sat at the counter, not looking at the menu. Black coffee. He said. Maya poured the cup and set it down. $2.50. The man placed a $5 bill on the counter. "Keep the change." "Thank you," Maya said, turning to the register. "You drive a hard shift, Miss Clark," the man said. Maya paused. She turned back slowly. "Do I know you?" "No," the man said. He took a sip of the scalding coffee without flinching. "But I know you. I know you work here. I know you drive for a rideshare app. And I know you have recently taken a consulting position at Vescari Transport." Maya's stomach dropped. "Who are you?" The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a leather badge holder. He flipped it open. "Detective Harris, Briarhaven Organized Crime Division." Maya stared at the badge. It looked real. The gold shield glinted under the fluorescent lights. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You?" "No," Harris said. He closed the badge. "You are just a passenger." A civilian caught in the blast radius. He reached into his pocket again and slid a photograph across the counter. It was a surveillance photo, grainy and black and white. It showed a man stepping out of a restaurant, flanked by 2 bodyguards. The man was wearing a tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome and terrifyingly powerful. It was Nico, but the caption typed below the photo did not say Nick the driver. It read, "Niccolo Vescari, head of the Vescari crime family." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the edge of the counter to keep her knees from buckling. "That is your boss," Harris said quietly. "Nico Vescari, not a logistics manager, not a chauffeur. He is the man who runs the rackets from the docks to the skyline." I did not know," Maya whispered. She thought of the wallet, the cash, the way he had handled the harasser in the coffee shop, the way everyone moved around him like he was a king. Harris looked at her with a mixture of pity and frustration. "Of course you did not know. That is how he operates. He finds people who are clean, innocent, desperate. He uses you to front the legitimate side of the business so the IRS and people like me have a harder time pinning down the dirt." He leaned forward. "You are a sweet girl, Maya. You have a clean record. Do not let him turn you into an accessory. You are just a front to him, a pretty face to distract from the blood. He stood up, finishing his coffee in one gulp. "Walk away," he advised, "before you see something you cannot unsee." He walked out into the rain, leaving Maya staring at the photograph of the man she thought she was beginning to know, the man whose thumb had rubbed circles on her shoulder, the man who had paid her rent, the man who was a monster. Anger, hot and blinding, replaced the fear. She felt foolish. She felt used. She had thought there was a connection, a spark of something real. But according to Harris, she was just a human shield, a layer of insulation for a criminal empire. She finished her shift in a daze, the photo burning a hole in her apron pocket. By the time she reached the Vescari office building that night, the anger had hardened into resolve. She stormed past the security guard, ignoring his surprised greeting. She took the elevator to the 12th floor and marched down the hallway. Nico was in his office. He was on the phone, speaking rapid-fire Italian, his back to the door. Maya didn't knock. She pushed the door open so hard it bounced off the stopper with a loud crack. Nico spun around, his hand instinctively going to his hip before he recognized her. He said something short into the phone and hung up. "Maya?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "What is wrong? You are early." Maya walked up to his desk and slammed the photograph down on top of his map. "Who are you?" she demanded. Nico looked down at the photo. His expression did not change. His face remained a mask of calm, but his eyes flickered. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "A detective gave it to me," Maya said, her voice rising. "He came to my job. He told me everything. Nico Vescari, the Vescari crime family." She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "And I thought you were just a driver. I thought you were—" "I do not know. A businessman. I am a businessman," Nico said. He walked around the desk, approaching her slowly, palms out. "Maya, listen to me?" "No," Maya shouted, stepping back. "Do not lie to me anymore. Is it true? Are you the head of a crime family?" Nico stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that another lie would break whatever fragile thing existed between them. "It is complicated," he said. "It is a yes or no question." "Nico, yes," he said. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Maya felt tears pricking her eyes. She wiped them away furiously. "So it was all a lie. The job, the kindness. You were just using me." "The detective said I am just a front, a clean face to hide your dirty money." "No," Nico said. The calm mask cracked. A flash of genuine pain crossed his face. "That is not true. The job is real. You are helping me legitimize the business. I am trying to move away from the past. I am trying to make it clean. By threatening people with wet pavement?" Maya threw his own words back at him. "I heard you." "Nico, I heard you tell Marco to handle the union guy." Nico's jaw tightened. He took a step closer, his presence suddenly filling the room. "You have no idea what you are talking about. You have no idea how dangerous the world circling my name is. I have been trying to keep you outside of it. I have been trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Maya scoffed. "By lying to me? You treated me like I was stupid, like I was some desperate charity case you could buy with a paycheck. I never treated you like charity," Nico growled. He closed the distance between them. "I gave you the job because I trust you, because you are the only honest thing I have found in this city in 10 years. He was standing right in front of her now. She could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. She could see the tension in his neck. "Then why did you lie?" she whispered. "Because I knew if you knew who I was, you would run," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "And I did not want you to run." Maya looked up at him. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. The anger was still there, but beneath it was something else, something terrifying and magnetic. "I hate this," she said, her voice shaking. "I hate that you lied. I hate that you are this." "But," Nico asked. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. "But I hate even more that I still feel safe with you," she admitted. "I hate that when that guy grabbed me. I was glad you were there. I hate that I feel something for you." The confession seemed to snap the last thread of Nico's restraint. He made a low sound in his throat. His hand came up to cup her jaw. his fingers curling lightly against her skin. "Maya," he breathed. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was urgent, searing, and unrestrained. It was the taste of a man who had been starving for something he knew he shouldn't have. His other hand splayed against her lower back, pulling her flush against him, crushing the space between them until she could feel the hard wall of his chest and the rapid thud of his heart matching hers. Maya melted into him. The anger didn't vanish, but it was consumed by the heat of the contact. She clutched the lapels of his shirt, pulling him closer, opening to him. He tasted of espresso and danger. For a moment, the world outside the office ceased to exist. There was no crime family, no detective, no debt. There was only the friction of his lips moving against hers, the roughness of his stubble grazing her chin, and the desperate, possessive way he held her. His thumb drifted along her cheekbone, a tender caress that contrasted with the hunger of the kiss. The pace slowed, deepening into something achingly intimate. He broke the kiss, but kept his forehead resting against hers, both of them gasping for air. "Maya," he whispered against her skin. He pulled back, forcing himself to put a few inches of distance between them. His eyes were dark, his pupils blown wide, but there was a look of profound regret warring with the desire on his face. "I cannot do this," he said, his voice ragged. Maya blinked, dazed. "What? I do not deserve this," he said. "I do not deserve you. Wanting you. Taking you. It is the one selfish thing I cannot afford." "Nico," Maya started, reaching for him. He caught her hand, holding it for a second before letting it go. "You need to go. Maya, you need to go home. Before I forget why I have to keep you away from me." Maya stood there, her lips swollen, her heart racing, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. He wanted her. She knew he did. She could still feel the imprint of his body against hers, but he was pushing her away. "Fine," she whispered, backing away. "I will go." She turned and fled the office, leaving Nico standing alone in the center of the room, looking like a man who had just sentenced himself to execution. The next 2 days passed in a blur of misery. Maya didn't go to the office. She ignored the few texts Nico sent, strictly professional updates about her paycheck. She focused on her shifts at the coffee shop, trying to scrub the memory of his kiss from her mind with the smell of sanitizer and old coffee grounds. It didn't work. On Saturday afternoon, the fragile peace she was trying to build shattered. The lunch rush had just ended. The shop was relatively quiet. Maya was behind the counter, organizing cups. Suddenly, a loud crash exploded through the front of the store. Maya screamed, ducking behind the counter as shards of glass sprayed across the floor. Customers shrieked and scrambled for cover. A brick had been thrown through the large plate glass window. It skidded across the floor and came to rest near the pastry case. Trembling, Maya stood up. Her manager was already on the phone with the police. Maya walked slowly toward the brick. There was a piece of paper rubber banded to it. She crouched down, avoiding the glass, and read the note. It was scrawled in thick black marker. "We see who the Vescari boss visits." The blood roared in Maya's ears. It was a message, a threat, and it was aimed at her. Before she could even process the terror, the back door of the shop burst open. 3 men in dark suits stormed in. Maya recognized one of them. It was Marco. "Miss Clark," Marco shouted, scanning the room. "I am here," she said, standing up. Marco rushed over to her, his gun clearly visible in its holster beneath his jacket. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with urgent necessity. "We need to go. Now, wait, the police," Maya stammered. "We are not waiting for the police," Marco said grimly. "The boss sent us. We have a car out back. You are not safe here." Maya looked at the shattered window. She looked at the terrified faces of her coworkers. She realized with a sickening clarity that Detective Harris had been right. She was in the blast radius. She let Marco lead her out the back door. A black SUV was idling in the alley. The door opened, and she was ushered inside. Nico was there. He looked different, harder, terrifying, and he was wearing a bulletproof vest under his shirt, the top buttons undone. He was on the phone, barking orders. "Lock down the perimeter. Find out who threw it. If it is the Moranos, burn their warehouse on 5th. He hung up and looked at Maya. His eyes swept over her, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "No," she said, her voice small. "Just scared." He let out a breath, reaching out as if to touch her, then stopping himself. "I am sorry," he said. "This is exactly what I wanted to prevent." "They know," Maya said, the note. "It said they see who you visit." "I know," Nico said grimly. "They are trying to get to me through you, which means you cannot go home." "What?" Maya asked. "Your apartment is not secure," Nico said. "If they know where you work, they know where you live. You are coming with me." "No," Maya said, panic rising. "I cannot just disappear. You do not have a choice." "Maya," Nico said. His voice was not the voice of Nick the driver. It was the voice of the dawn. "You are a target now. The only place you are safe is where I can see you." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Please, let me protect you. I dragged you into this. Let me keep you alive." Maya looked at him. She saw the guilt in his eyes, but also the fierce, unyielding determination. She thought of the brick. She thought of how easily it could have been a bullet. "Okay," she whispered. "Where are we going? I have a safe house," Nico said as the car peeled out of the alley. "A secure apartment. You will stay there until things cool down." As the SUV merged into traffic, flanked by 2 other black vehicles, Maya realized she had crossed a line. There was no going back to her old life. She was sitting next to the most dangerous man in the city, a man she had kissed, a man who was now the only thing standing between her and death. She looked out the window as the city blurred by. She was not just a passenger anymore. She was part of the ride, and she had a terrible feeling that the road ahead was going to be covered in blood. The car arrived at a high-rise building in the financial district, a fortress of glass and steel. They took a private elevator to the penthouse floor. Nico led her into an apartment that was vast, beautiful, and completely impersonal. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city she had spent her whole life in, but never seen from this height. "You will be safe here," Nico said, locking the heavy steel door behind them. "No one gets in without my permission." Maya stood in the center of the living room, hugging her arms around herself. She felt small. She felt trapped. And yet, when Nico walked past her to check the window locks, she felt a pull in her chest, a gravitational force that tethered her to him. "I am sorry, Maya," he said again, not looking at her. Maya looked at his back, the broad shoulders that carried the weight of a criminal empire. "Just tell me one thing," she said. He turned. "Anything. That night in the rain," she said softly. "With the wallet. Was that a test?" Nico went still. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "Yes," he said finally. Maya closed her eyes. It hurt. It hurt more than the brick. "But," Nico added, his voice rough, "I never expected to fail it myself." "How did you fail?" she asked, opening her eyes. "By falling for the mark," he said. He turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving her alone with the view of the city and the truth that she was in love with a man who might just get her killed. The apartment was a gilded cage, suspended 20 stories above the city. It was owned by a shell company, Aurora Holdings, and everything about it, from the minimalist Italian furniture to the fully stocked stainless steel refrigerator, spoke of wealth that needed to remain invisible. For the first 3 days, Maya felt less like a guest and more like a protected hostage. There was a security detail in the hallway 24 hours a day. She could not leave without an escort. Her phone had been replaced with a secure encrypted device. The view of Briarhaven from the floor-to-ceiling windows was breathtaking. A sprawling grid of lights and rain-slicked streets, but it only served to remind her of how far removed she was from her own life. Yet isolation had a strange way of distorting time and accelerating intimacy. Nico was rarely there during the day. He was out managing the chaos that had erupted since the brick came through the coffee shop window. But he always returned at night. He would come in late, sometimes past 2 in the morning, shedding the armor of his suit jacket and the weight of his command as he crossed the threshold. He looked exhausted. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his movements slower. It started with small moments. One Tuesday at 3 a.m, Maya woke up thirsty and padded into the kitchen. She found Nico sitting at the island counter, illuminated only by the under-cabinet lighting. He had loosened his tie and rolled his shirt sleeves up to his elbows, revealing the strong, corded muscles of his forearms. He was staring into a glass of amber liquid, his expression unguarded and bleak. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He looked up, startled, then offered a tired, lopsided smile that made her heart ache. "The quiet is too loud tonight," he admitted. She sat on the stool next to him. They shared a plate of cold pasta left over from the dinner his staff had delivered. At first, they talked about logistics, her safety, the investigation into the brick incident, but slowly, the conversation drifted. They talked about their mothers. Nico spoke of a woman who sang opera in the kitchen while making Sunday gravy, who died before she could see her son become the thing she feared most. Maya spoke of the smell of turpentine and oil paints, of her mother teaching her to see the light in the shadows. Their knees bumped under the counter. Unlike in the car, neither of them pulled away. "Nico," Maya asked one night, watching him rub his temples, "do you ever think about leaving, just walking away?" "Every day," he said, his voice low. "But this life, it has gravity. The harder you try to escape, the harder it pulls you back. I think you are strong enough to break orbit," she said. He looked at her then, his gray eyes searching hers with a vulnerability that stole the breath from her lungs. "I never had a reason to try," he whispered. "Not until now." The shift happened on a Friday. The weather had turned violent again, a thunderstorm battering the glass walls of the penthouse. Maya was pacing the living room, anxious because Nico was late. He was usually back by midnight. It was nearly 2. When the lock finally clicked, she rushed to the hallway. Nico stumbled in. He was pale. There was a smudge of dirt on his forehead, and his white dress shirt was spotted with red on the left shoulder. "Nico," Maya gasped, running to him. "I am fine," he said, though he hissed when he tried to shrug off his jacket. "Just a detour. Some broken glass." "You are bleeding," she said, her voice trembling. He let her lead him into the kitchen. He sat heavily on the edge of the counter, his legs spread, while she scrambled for the first aid kit she had found under the sink. It was a shallow cut on his cheek, just below the eye, and a few smaller nicks on his neck. "Shards from a car window," he explained tersely. "A drive-by." His driver had swerved. The armored glass had held mostly, but the impact had shattered the inner layer. Maya stood between his knees, dampening a cloth with antiseptic. Her hands were shaking. "Hold still," she whispered. Nico went perfectly still. He did not flinch as she dabbed at the cut on his cheek. His eyes, dark and intense, tracked every movement of her face. He was watching her as if he were trying to memorize her. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why do you stay? You could die." "Nico, tonight could have been it." "I know," he said. "I hate it," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "I hate seeing you hurt. I hate waiting here wondering if you are coming back in a body bag." She dropped the cloth, her hands resting on his shoulders. "Please, Nico, walk away before it is too late." Nico looked at her. The adrenaline of the attack was fading, replaced by something far more potent. He reached out, his fingers encircling her wrist gently. He guided her hand down from his shoulder, pressing her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. "Feel that?" he asked softly. It was racing, a frantic, powerful rhythm beating against her palm. "That is fear." "Maya," he said, "not fear of dying. I made peace with that years ago. It is fear of leaving you behind." His thumb stroked the inside of her wrist, sending shivers racing up her arm. "I have never had a reason strong enough to leave," he repeated, his voice thickening with emotion. "Until you." Maya looked at him, her heart pounding in sync with his. The air in the kitchen grew heavy, charged with the electricity of the storm outside and the undeniable pull between them. She took a step closer, moving deeper into the space between his knees. "Then leave," she whispered. For me. Nico let out a ragged breath. He looked at her mouth, then up into her amber eyes. The restraint he had been holding on to for weeks, the wall he had built to keep her safe from his own darkness, finally crumbled. He reached up, cupping her face in both of his large, warm hands. His thumbs swept under her jaw, tilting her head back. Maya, he breathed. He leaned in and kissed her. It was different from the kiss in the office. There was no anger this time, no desperation to push her away. It was slow, deep, aching with a tenderness that shattered her defenses completely. Maya rose onto her toes, her hands sliding up his chest to wrap around his neck, her fingers tangling in the dark hair at the nape of his neck. She pressed herself against him, needing to feel the solidity of him, the proof that he was alive and warm and hers. Nico made a low sound in his throat, a growl of surrender. His arms went around her waist, pulling her flush against his body. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was the only air left in the universe. He tasted of rain and iron and desire. The kiss grew heated, their breathing turning shallow and ragged. His hands trailed down her back, learning the curve of her spine, anchoring her to him. The kitchen light cast their silhouettes against the fridge, two figures merging into one. Nico pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were blown wide. Dark pools of want. Maya, he murmured against her lips. It sounded like a promise. It sounded like a warning. Don't stop, she whispered. He didn't. He kissed her again, harder this time, lifting her effortlessly as he slid off the counter. Maya wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in the crook of his neck, inhaling his scent. The scene faded into the shadows of the hallway as he carried her toward the bedroom, the storm outside forgotten, the only reality, the heat of their skin and the desperate, silent language of two people who had finally stopped fighting gravity. Later. The room was quiet. The rain had slowed to a gentle patter against the glass. Maya lay with her head on Nico's chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady now, slow. His arm was heavy around her waist, holding her close, as if he expected her to vanish if he let go. His face was buried in her hair. She traced the bandage on his cheek with a fingertip. She felt safe. It was a paradox, lying in the arms of a man who had been shot at hours ago, but she felt safer than she ever had in her empty apartment. But beneath the safety, there was terror. She had crossed the line. She wasn't just the innocent bystander anymore. She was his, and in his world, being his meant being a target. Nico, she whispered. He rumbled, his voice thick with sleep. What happens now? He tightened his arm around her. Now, he said quietly, pressing a kiss to her temple. I protect you. I will never let anyone touch you. Maya, I swear it. I will burn this city down before I let them hurt you. The promise sent a chill down her spine, but she snuggled closer, choosing to believe him. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the apartment in a cold, clear light. Over coffee, Nico sat her down at the table. He looked different in the daylight, less like a mythical figure, more like a man. He wore a t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair messy, the bruise on his cheek turning purple. He told her everything. He didn't spare the details. He told her about his father, the previous Don, who had been gunned down in a restaurant when Nico was 20. He told her how he had taken the wheel, literally and figuratively, starting as a driver to understand the streets before taking the throne. He told her about the Morano family, the rivals who were currently trying to bleed the Vescari organization dry. He told her about the police investigation, the Rico case that was slowly building, the walls closing in. There is blood on these hands. Maya, he said, looking at his palms, a lot of it. I have ordered hits. I have ruined lives. I am not a good man. He looked at her, his expression raw. But I want to be better. For you. The honesty hurt. It stripped away the romantic veneer of the misunderstood rogue and left the gritty reality of a career criminal. But it also made her love him more, because he was trusting her with the ammunition that could destroy him. I am not going anywhere, she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. We will figure it out." Nico squeezed her fingers, looking at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "You really are too good for this world." Maya, that afternoon. Nico had to leave for a meeting with his lawyers. Maya stayed behind, feeling a new sense of purpose. She wasn't a hostage anymore. She was a partner. She decided to surprise him by organizing the chaotic stack of files he had left on the desk in the study. She was sorting through a pile of bank statements when she heard voices in the hallway. The security guard must have let someone in. It was Nico's voice, and another man's. She recognized it as Marco. They were walking toward the study, but stopped just outside the door. "We need to move the assets," Marco was saying. "If the feds raid the accounts, we're frozen." "I am handling it," Nico said. "And what about the girl?" Marco asked. "Is she still useful?" Maya froze. She knew she should announce herself, but the tone of Marco's voice made her stop. "She is not an asset." "Marco," Nico replied, his voice sharp. "She started as one." Marco countered. "Come on, boss. You remember the plan, the wallet drop, the test. We needed a clean face for the logistics front. We picked her because she was desperate and had no family to ask questions. We planted the wallet to see if she would steal. If she did, we owned her. If she returned it, we trusted her." Maya felt the floor drop out from under her. The room spun. It wasn't fate. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a serendipitous moment in the rain. It was a setup. They planted the wallet. She remembered his amusement on the phone. "You are an honest woman." He hadn't been impressed. He had been checking a box on a clipboard. Test passed. Proceed with recruitment. She heard Nico sigh. That was business. "Marco, before I knew her. And now?" Marco pressed. "Now she is the only thing that matters," Nico said. But Maya couldn't hear the conviction in his voice anymore. All she could hear was the lie. The foundation of their entire relationship, the magical, cinematic moment where their worlds collided, was a fabrication, a calculated experiment on a desperate woman. She felt sick. She felt like a lab rat that had fallen in love with the scientist. The door handle turned. Nico walked in, looking tired but smiling when he saw her. "Maya, He stopped. He saw her face. He saw the way she was clutching the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. "Maya?" he asked, his smile faltering. "What is wrong?" Maya looked at him. The love she had felt that morning was currently drowning in a tidal wave of betrayal and humiliation. "The wallet," she whispered. Nico went still. His eyes flicked to the slightly open door. Realizing Marco's voice must have carried, "Maya, listen, you planted it," she said, her voice rising. "You put it in my car. You knew I was drowning in debt. You knew I was grieving, and you tested me? Like I was a dog you were thinking of adopting?" Nico took a step forward, his hands raised. It was standard procedure. We needed someone clean for the front office. We had to be sure. "Standard procedure?" she shouted, tears spilling over. "My life is not your procedure." "Nico, I agonized over that money. I cried because I wanted to keep it so bad. I thought returning it meant something. I thought we meant something." "We do," Nico pleaded. "We do mean something. That was before. It is all poison." "Nico," she cried, "every kind word, every job offer. It was all just you manipulating me into your web. You did not save me. You trapped me." She grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight from the desk and hurled it at the wall. It shattered, raining glass onto the hardwood floor. "I want to leave," she said, shaking. "Maya, you cannot leave," Nico said, panic entering his voice. "The Maranos." "I do not care about the Maranos," she screamed. "I would rather take my chances with them than stay one more second with a liar like you." She stormed past him. Nico reached out to grab her arm, but she flinched away so violently he recoiled. "Do not touch me," she spat. He let her go. He stood in the wreckage of his study, watching the only woman he had ever loved walk out the door, knowing that this time, his power, his money, and his lies could not fix it. He had passed the test of survival 1,000 times, but he had failed the test of trust, and the cost was walking out the elevator doors. The silence in the penthouse was not peaceful. It was the suffocating quiet of a vacuum after an explosion. The shattered remains of the crystal paperweight lay scattered across the hardwood floor like diamonds, a glittering testament to the fracture between them. Maya stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving, her hands balled into fists at her sides. The rage that had erupted moments ago had not dissipated. Instead, it had crystallized into a cold, hard clarity. She looked at Nico, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing the face of the man she had loved. "You played God with my life," she said, her voice shaking not with fear, but with the vibration of pure anger. From the very first second, that phone call, the rain, the way you looked at me when I handed you the wallet, it was all a performance. Nico took a step toward her, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender that looked foreign on a man accustomed to command. It was not a performance. "Maya," he said, his voice rough. "The initial contact was a test. Yes, I admitted that. But everything after? The way I felt, the way I feel now? That is the only real thing in my life." Maya let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "How am I supposed to believe that?" she demanded. "How do I separate the man from the manipulator? Every time you touched me, were you grading me? When you offered me the job, was that affection or just asset management? When you kissed me in the kitchen, was that part of the evaluation?" Nico flinched as if she had struck him. "I never expected to care," he pleaded, desperation cracking his composure. "You have to understand the world I live in. Trust is a liability. It gets people killed. I needed to know if you were incorruptible before I let you near the operation. It was about survival." "Survival?" she repeated, stepping into his space, her eyes blazing. "You made me a lab rat in your maze. Nico, you dangled money in front of a woman who was drowning in debt just to see if she would bite. You stripped me of my dignity before I even knew your name." She shoved his chest. It was a futile gesture against his solid frame, but the force of her emotion made him stumble back a step. "I am not a variable in your equation," she shouted. "I am a person, and you are a monster who thinks he can buy loyalty with tests and tricks." Nico grabbed her wrists. He did not squeeze, but his grip was firm, anchoring her to him. He pulled her close, forcing her to look up into his eyes, which were storm gray and filled with a terrifying intensity. "I am a monster," he rasped, the confession tearing out of him. "I have never claimed to be a saint, but I am a monster who loves you. My feelings are the only thing I have not calculated in 10 years. You broke the algorithm. Maya, you saved me." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and stinging. She looked at his face, the scar on his cheek that she had tended to, the mouth that had whispered promises against her skin, and she felt her heart breaking in two. "I do not know how to love someone who chooses manipulation as a language," she whispered, her voice breaking. She ripped her wrists free from his grasp. The loss of contact felt like a physical blow to both of them. "I need to leave," she said. Nico went rigid. "You cannot leave. It is not safe. The Moranos are still hunting." "I do not care," Maya cried. "I cannot stay here. I cannot look at you and wonder if our entire history is a lie. I need to know who I am when I am not orbiting your danger. I need to breathe air that you do not own." She turned and marched into the bedroom. She did not pack everything. She threw a few shirts, jeans, and her toiletries into a duffel bag with frantic, jerky movements. She wanted to be gone before her resolve crumbled, before the look in his eyes convinced her to stay and accept the beautiful lie. When she walked back into the living room, Nico was standing by the door. He looked like a statue carved from grief. "Please," he said, his voice barely audible, "do not go." Maya paused, her hand on the doorknob. She looked back at him one last time. "If you love me," she said quietly, "you will let me walk out this door. If you keep me here against my will, then you really are just a jailer, and I will never forgive you." Nico clenched his jaw so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He looked at the woman who had returned his wallet and stolen his heart, and he knew he had lost if he forced her to stay. He would kill the spirit he loved. He would become the villain she feared. He stepped aside. "Take the secure car," he said, his voice dead. "Please." Maya nodded once, accepting the compromise. She walked past him, the scent of cedar and rain lingering in her wake, and the door clicked shut between them with the finality of a gunshot. Nico stood in the silence, listening to the elevator descend, knowing he had just let his soul walk out of the building. 2 hours later. Maya stood in the center of her old studio apartment. It smelled of dust and neglect. The space was cramped, the faucet dripped, and the view was of a brick wall. Not the glittering city skyline, but it was hers. She sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, her face buried in her hands. She had expected to feel relief. Instead, she felt a hollow, aching void in her chest. Every corner of her mind was filled with Nico. His laugh, his touch, the way he had looked at her when she bandaged his face. The truth of the wallet test stung, but the truth of her feelings stung more. She loved him. God help her. She still loved him. She needed coffee. She needed to clear her head. She grabbed her keys and walked out of the building. It was dusk, the sky bruising purple over Briarhaven. She ordered a rideshare on her phone, intending to go to a diner across town where nobody knew her name. A gray sedan pulled up to the curb 3 minutes later. The make and model matched the app. The driver smiled at her through the window. "Maya Clark?" he asked. "Yes," she said. She opened the back door and slid in. The moment the door closed, the lock engaged with a heavy, mechanical thud. Maya frowned. The driver turned around. It was not the man from the app photo. He was older, with a scar running through his eyebrow and a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Hello, sweetheart," he said. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in Maya's chest. She grabbed the door handle. It would not budge. "Let me out," she said, her voice rising. "You are not my driver. We have a better ride for you," the man said. Before she could scream, a second man rose from the floorboard of the front passenger seat, turning to spray something acrid and chemical into her face. The world tilted. Maya clawed at the window, her vision blurring, her limbs turning to lead. As the car peeled away from the curb, her hand went slack. Her keys slipped from her fingers, landing on the pavement outside as the door slammed shut. Her travel mug of coffee, which she had been holding, fell and burst open, a dark stain spreading across the concrete like dried blood, the only evidence that she had ever been there. The call came into the Vescari penthouse 20 minutes later. Nico was sitting in the dark, staring at the empty spot on the floor where Maya had stood. When Marco burst into the room, holding a tablet, Nico knew. He knew before a word was spoken. The air in the room shifted, charged with a sudden, violent energy. "She is gone," Marco said, his face pale. Nico stood up slowly. "What do you mean, gone? We had a tail on her building," Marco explained rapidly. "A car picked her up. We thought it was a standard ride, but the tail found her keys on the sidewalk. The plates were cloned. It was a snatch. Boss." A sound tore out of Nico's throat, a roar of pure, animalistic fury that made Marco flinch. Nico swept his arm across the nearest table, sending a lamp and a vase crashing into the wall. "Find her," he screamed. "I want every camera in a 10-mile radius. I want every informant on the street. If a leaf falls in this city, I want to know about it." He stormed out of the penthouse and into the elevator, descending to the secure server room they called the War Room. His men, hardened soldiers who had seen him handle federal indictments and gang wars without blinking, scattered out of his path. They had never seen Nico Vescari like this. He was not the cool, calculated chess player today. He was a man whose heart had been ripped out of his chest, and he was ready to burn the world to ash to get it back. "Get the Moranos on the phone," Nico ordered, his voice trembling with suppressed violence. "Tell them if they touch a hair on her head, I will kill their children's children." "Boss," Marco said, looking at a monitor. "We just got a ping, a burner phone. It is video calling you." "Put it on the screen," Nico commanded. The main wall monitor flickered to life. The image was grainy, lit by harsh industrial floodlights. Nico's blood froze in his veins. Maya was tied to a metal chair in the center of a cavernous warehouse. Her head was slumped forward, her hair falling across her face. There was a bruise forming on her temple. "Maya!" Nico shouted at the screen. Forgetting for a second that she could not hear him yet, a hand grabbed Maya's hair and yanked her head back. Marco Marano stepped into the frame, grinning. He was the younger brother of the Marano boss, a man known for his cruelty and lack of imagination. "Hello?" "Nico," Marco sneered. "You lost something?" Maya swam back to consciousness through a headache that felt like a spike being driven into her skull. The smell of rust and damp concrete filled her nose. She tried to move her hands and found them zip-tied to the back of a chair. She blinked, her vision clearing. She was in a warehouse. Crates were stacked high in the shadows. Standing in front of her was a man she recognized from the news, Marco Marano. He was holding a tablet in front of her face. "Wake up, princess," Marco said. Maya groaned, the memory of the kidnapping crashing back into her mind. "Look," Marco commanded. He tapped the screen. Photos scrolled past, horrific photos. Nico standing over a beaten man, Nico shaking hands with a corrupt politician, a burning building that Maya recognized as a rival nightclub from a year ago. "This is your boyfriend," Marco taunted. "The devil of Briarhaven. You fell for the suit, didn't you? You thought he was Prince Charming. He is a butcher. I know who he is," Maya rasped, her throat dry. "Oh, you think you know?" Marco laughed. "He does not love you. You are just a weakness, a loose end, and tonight we are going to use you to tie a noose around his neck." He pulled a phone out of his pocket and dialed a number. He put it on speaker and held it to Maya's ear. "Speak," he ordered. "Make him come, or I break your fingers one by one." The line clicked. "Maya?" Nico's voice filled the warehouse. It was strained, terrified. "Maya, are you there, Nico?" she whispered. She heard his sharp intake of breath, the sound of his pain cut through her own fear. In that moment, the anger about the wallet, the lies, the manipulation, it all seemed small. He was terrified for her. And she realized, with a clarity that only imminent death could bring, that she would rather die than let him walk into a trap. "Nico, do not come," she cried out. "It is a trap." Marco backhanded her across the face. The blow was sharp and stinging. Maya tasted copper. "Shut up," Marco hissed. "Tell him where to meet us." He grabbed her jaw, forcing her to look at the phone. "Tell him to come to the docks, Pier 42, alone, or you die." Maya's mind raced. Pier 42, the docks, it was a killing field. If he came alone, they would slaughter him. She had to warn him. She had to give him an edge. "Nico," she said, her voice shaking. He says you have to come to the docks. Pier 42. I am coming," Nico said instantly. "I am coming now." "Wait," Maya said, her breath hitching. "Please, Nico, remember what we talked about?" "What?" Nico asked, confusion coloring his panic. "The bad coffee," she said, emphasizing the words. "Remember the bad coffee by the water? Just bring me home." There was a pause. A silence that lasted a heartbeat too long. "I remember," Nico said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming cold and focused. "I am on my way." Marco ended the call. He looked at Maya suspiciously. "What was that? Bad coffee?" "Just a stupid joke," Maya said, leaning her head back against the chair, trying to keep her hands from trembling. "About a date we went on," Marco snorted. "How romantic. Enjoy the memory. It will be your last one." He walked away, barking orders to his men to set up positions. He left a young guard, a kid who looked no older than 19, to watch her. Maya sat in the gloom, her heart pounding. Bad coffee by the water. It was a code they had established weeks ago, back when she was just translating documents. Nico had joked that if a shipment was ever bad coffee, it meant the cargo was compromised and the pickup point was hot, surrounded by heat. Police or enemies, and by the water was their shorthand for the east side of the docks, where the lighting was poor and the cranes offered sniper positions. She prayed he understood. She prayed she hadn't just called him to his death. She looked at the young guard. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his rifle looking too big for his hands. He looked nervous. "You do not look like a killer," Maya said softly. The guard jumped. "Shut up. My name is Maya," she said. "I know who you are." "Do you know who is coming?" she asked. "Nico Vascari." The guard swallowed hard. "We have him outnumbered, 10 to 1. Maya shook her head sadly. It does not matter. He's not coming to fight. He's coming to burn this place down. Do you really think Marco Morano cares if you get caught in the fire? The guard's eyes darted to his boss, who was laughing with another gunman across the room. You are just a pawn, Maya whispered, channeling the cold certainty she had seen in Nico. Just like I was. When the bullets start flying, Marco will hide. You will be the one standing in the open. The guard looked at her, sweat beading on his upper lip. My wrists hurt, she said, shifting her tone to one of pain. Please, just loosen them a little. I am not going anywhere, and if I scream, it will just make you more nervous. The guard hesitated. He looked at Marco, then back at Maya. The fear in his eyes was a mirror of her own. Slowly, he reached out and pulled the zip tie, and he didn't cut it, but he slid the locking mechanism back just a fraction of an inch. It was enough. The plastic bit into her skin less. She had room to wiggle. Thank you, she breathed. In the back of the armored SUV speeding toward the waterfront, Nico Vescari checked the clip of his handgun for the third time. He was not alone. He had ignored the advice to bring an army, but he had brought his 3 best men, instructing them to approach from the water, silent and deadly, but he would walk in the front door alone. That was the price of admission. Marco thinks he has leverage, Nico said to the empty air. He thinks I'm walking in blind. Bad coffee by the water. She had warned him. Even after everything, after the betrayal, the fight, the revelation of the wallet, she had used their private language to save him. The realization hit him harder than a bullet. She still loved him. Or at least, she loved him enough to want him alive. He reached into his inner jacket pocket, his fingers brushed against leather. He pulled out the wallet, the same expensive Italian leather wallet that had started it all. It was scuffed now, worn from being carried in his pocket every day since she had returned it. It was his talisman, a reminder of the one variable he hadn't accounted for, Grace. He tucked it back against his heart. Right over the Kevlar vest. We are going to get her back, he whispered. He signaled the driver to kill the lights. The warehouse loomed ahead, a dark stain against the night sky. Nico Vescari stepped out of the car. He adjusted his cuffs. He checked his gun one last time, and then he walked into the darkness. Not as a businessman, not as a driver, but as a man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. The Briarhaven docks were a graveyard of rusted steel and shipping containers, looming like skeletal fingers against the bruised purple sky. The wind coming off the water smelled of brine and diesel, slapping hollowly against the rotting pilings of Pier 42. Nico Vescari did not bring the army his advisors had begged him to deploy. An army would mean a war, and in a war, the hostages were always the first collateral damage. Instead, he arrived in a stripped-down convoy, leaving the heavy SUVs a mile back. He approached the warehouse on foot, flanked only by 2 of his most lethal shadows, moving through the maze of crates with the silence of ghosts. He checked the weight of the pistol in his hand. He checked the wallet tucked against his heart. If it comes down to a choice, he told the silence in his head, if it is me or her, she goes home, inside the warehouse. The air was stagnant and cold. Maya sat in the chair, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The young guard she had spoken to earlier had drifted away, distracted by the arrival of more of Marco's men. Maya tested her wrists. The zip tie was loose, painfully tight if she pulled the wrong way, but loose enough. She twisted her hand, scraping skin, compressing her thumb until the joint popped. With a stifled gasp, her right hand slipped free. She did not move immediately. She kept her hands behind her back, feigning captivity. Her eyes darted around the floor. There, a few feet away, near a discarded pallet, lay a rusty utility knife dropped by a dockworker days ago. When the guards turned their attention to the screeching sound of the main bay door rolling open, Maya moved. She slid the knife into her palm, retracted the blade, and tucked it into her waistband at the small of her back. She tried to stand, to inch toward the shadows of the crate stacks, but a heavy hand clamped onto her shoulder. Going somewhere? Marco Morano sneered. He dragged her to her feet, his grip bruising her arm. He pulled her into the center of the open floor, illuminated by the harsh glare of halogen work lights. "He is here," Marco announced, raising his voice to the rafters. The bay doors fully opened. Nico walked in. He was alone. He wore a dark suit, the jacket buttoned, his hands visible and empty at his sides. He looked small against the vastness of the industrial cavern, but his presence filled the room, sucking the oxygen out of the air. He did not look at the 10 guns pointed at his chest. He looked only at Maya. He saw the smudge of dirt on her cheek. He saw the terror in her wide, amber eyes. And beneath the terror, he saw the fire. She was not broken. "Let her go." "Marco," Nico said. His voice was not loud, but it carried perfectly over the hum of the distant generators. Marco laughed. A jagged sound. "You are in no position to give orders. Vascari, you walked into the lion's den alone. I should shoot you where you stand and take the city by morning." "If you shoot me," Nico said calmly, "my associates will release a file to the FBI within 10 minutes. It contains the GPS coordinates of every shipment you have coming in for the next 6 months. You will be bankrupt by Tuesday." Marco's smile faltered. "I am offering a trade," Nico continued. He took a step forward. The guns tracked him. "What kind of trade?" Marco asked. "Everything," Nico said. Maya's breath hitched. "I will sign over the union contracts for the construction district," Nico said, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "I will give you the routes through the rail yard. I will transfer the offshore accounts in the Caymans. $10 million. Liquid." The warehouse went silent. Even Marco's gunmen looked at each other, stunned. Nico was offering the crown jewels of his empire. He was offering the power that men had died for, killed for, and bled for. "You are lying," Marco spat. "You would not give up the city for a girl. Test me." Nico said, cold as ice. "Let her walk out that door, and I will hand you the tablet with the access codes right now." Maya stared at him. She realized, with a jolt that shook her to her core, that the test was over. There was no calculation here, no manipulation. He was stripping himself of his armor, his legacy, and his power, just to ensure she took another breath. Marco looked at Nico, then at Maya. Greed warred with suspicion in his eyes. "I think," Marco said slowly, raising his gun, "I will take the codes, and then I will kill you both anyway. It is cleaner that way." The air in the warehouse tightened, snapping like a rubber band. Maya looked at the gun pointed at Nico's heart. She looked at the man who was willing to lose everything for her. "No," she whispered. She did not think. She acted. As Marco turned his head slightly to shout an order to his men, Maya dropped her act. She feigned a stumble, her knees buckling. Marco instinctively yanked her arm to keep her upright. Using his momentum against him, she wrenched her arm free, spun, and shoved the young guard standing next to her with all her strength. The guard crashed into Marco. A gun went off, a deafening crack that echoed off the metal roof. "Now!" Nico roared. He did not freeze. The moment Maya moved, he was in motion. He dove forward, not away from the danger, but directly into it. At the same instant, the glass of the skylights high above shattered as Nico's hidden snipers, the men he had allegedly left behind, opened fire. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Nico hit Maya at full speed, tackling her around the waist and driving her behind a stack of heavy wooden pallets, just as the air where she had been standing filled with lead. They hit the concrete floor hard, Nico taking the brunt of the impact. He rolled, pulling her underneath him, shielding her body with his own. Splinters of wood rained down on them as bullets shredded the top of the pallet stack. "Stay down!" Nico shouted over the roar of gunfire. He pulled his pistol from his waistband and fired blindly around the corner of the crate, providing suppressing fire. Maya was gasping for air, her face pressed against the rough wool of his jacket. She felt a sudden, sharp jerk in Nico's body. He grunted, a wet, guttural sound, and his arm buckled for a second before he locked it back in place. "Nico!" she cried. She pulled back. A dark stain was spreading rapidly across the white shirt beneath his jacket, just above his hip. "You are hit!" she screamed, pressing her hand over the wound. The blood was hot and sticky against her palm. "It is a graze," he gritted out, his face pale but his eyes burning with adrenaline. "I am fine. You are not fine. Maya, look at me." He grabbed her face with his free hand, his fingers digging into her cheeks, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were wild, desperate, and filled with a love so intense it terrified her. "I am not leaving you," she sobbed, reading the intent in his eyes. "Do not tell me to run. I am not leaving you here. I need you to survive," he rasped. "I need you," she yelled back, her voice cutting through the noise of the battle. "I love you, Nico. Do you hear me? I love you. I am not going anywhere." Nico stared at her. The confession hit him harder than the bullet. He leaned in, crushing his mouth to hers. It was a kiss of blood and gunpowder, a desperate seal on a promise made in the face of death. "Then we finish this," he said against her lips. He looked around. The warehouse was a kill box. They were pinned down. Marco's men had the high ground on the catwalks. "The lights," Nico said, glancing at the main breaker box on the far wall, 30 feet away. "If we kill the lights, my men have thermal. We win." Maya followed his gaze. She felt the utility knife in her waistband. "Cover me," she said. "What?" Nico grabbed her arm. "No, you cannot make that run," she said, pressing her hand to his bleeding side. "You are hurt. I am faster. Cover me." Before he could stop her, she scrambled away from the safety of the pallets. Nico roared in frustration, spinning out from cover and firing with terrifying precision. He dropped 2 men on the catwalk, drawing the enemy fire toward him, making himself the target to buy her seconds. Maya sprinted through the shadows, keeping low. Bullets sparked against the concrete near her feet. She reached the wall and threw herself behind a forklift. The breaker panel was right there. It was locked. She cursed, jamming the utility knife into the seam of the metal door. She put all her weight on it, prying it open with a screech of tearing metal. "Hey!" a voice shouted behind her. Maya spun around. A gunman had flanked her. He raised his weapon. "Nico!" she screamed. "Behind you!" Nico didn't look. He trusted her voice. He spun, dropping to one knee, and fired a single shot past Maya's head. The gunman behind her crumpled. Maya turned back to the panel. She didn't know which switch controlled the overheads. She raised the knife and slashed down through the cluster of exposed wires. Sparks showered down on her, stinging her arms. With a massive pop, the overhead halogen lights died. The warehouse plunged into pitch blackness. For a second, there was silence. Then, the rhythmic, suppressed thwip-thwip of Nico's team moving in with night vision. Maya stayed curled in a ball, listening to the sounds of men falling, of orders shouted in panic by Marco's crew. Then, a hand touched her shoulder. She flinched, slashing out with the knife. "It is me," Nico's voice whispered. "It is me." She dropped the knife and collapsed into his arms. He pulled her up, holding her tightly against his uninjured side. "It is over," he said. Suddenly, a flashlight beam cut through the dark. Marco Morano was crawling toward the exit, dragging a shattered leg. He was trying to reach a dropped submachine gun. Nico stepped into the beam of light. He raised his pistol. His face was a mask of cold, unadulterated rage. He walked toward the man who had bruised Maya's face, who had threatened to kill her. Nico cocked the hammer. "No police," Nico snarled. "No deals. You die tonight." Marco looked up, eyes wide with terror, pleading. Nico's finger tightened on the trigger. He wanted this. He wanted to wash the fear of the last 6 hours away in Marco's blood. "Nico." The voice was soft. It came from beside him. Maya laid her hand gently on his forearm. Her touch was light, but it stopped him as effectively as a wall. "Do not do it," she whispered. "He touched you," Nico said, his voice shaking. "He hurt you. If you pull that trigger," she said, looking into his dark eyes, "you confirm everything he said about you. You become the devil he thinks you are." She stepped in front of him, placing her body between the gun and the man on the floor. "You said you wanted to walk away. Nico, you said you wanted a reason. I am the reason, but I cannot follow you into the dark. If you kill him like this, in cold blood, you will never come back." Nico looked at her. He saw the dust on her face, the blood on her hands, his blood. He saw the woman who had returned a wallet because she refused to let the world make her hard. He looked at Marco, a pathetic heap on the floor. He looked back at Maya, slowly, agonizingly. The tension left his shoulders. He exhaled a breath that shuddered through his entire frame. He lowered the gun. "Secure him," Nico barked to the shadows where his men waited. "Leave the evidence. Call the tip line." He holstered his weapon and wrapped his arm around Maya, burying his face in her neck. "Let us go home," he whispered. The fallout was swift and absolute. Acting on an anonymous tip that included video surveillance and a cache of digital records, the Briarhaven Police Department raided Pier 42. Marco Morano was arrested along with 20 of his top lieutenants. The evidence provided was so detailed, so damning, that the Morano crime family effectively ceased to exist overnight. In the weeks that followed, the city held its breath. Rumors swirled through the underworld. They said Nico Vescari had gone soft. They said he had turned snitch. They said he was out. They were right. Slowly, quietly, Vescari Transport and Logistics began to sell off its more questionable subsidiaries. The shell companies were dissolved. The illicit routes were closed. One rainy afternoon, Detective Harris found Maya sitting on a bench in the park, watching the river. He sat down next to her. He didn't look at her. "Your boyfriend is making my life very complicated," Harris said. "How so?" Maya asked, staring at the gray water. "He keeps sending me files." Harris said, "Cold cases, corrupt zoning officials, human trafficking rings. He is cleaning house." "Maya, is that a bad thing?" Harris sighed. "No. It is a miracle. If he keeps this up, if he keeps cooperating, the district attorney might be inclined to look the other way regarding his own past. We would rather have a retired asset than a martyr." He stood up and tipped his hat. "Tell him to drive safe. Miss Clark." 6 months later, the new Harbor Brew was located in the trendy Uptown district. It was warm, filled with the scent of high-quality Arabica and the hum of happy conversation. It was owned by a silent partner, but the deed to the building was in Maya Clark's name. It was closing time. The rain was lashing against the windows, a familiar rhythm that no longer signaled dread. Maya wiped down the last table. She looked up as the bell chimed. Nico walked in. He looked different. The darkness that used to cling to him like a second skin was gone. He wore a simple sweater and jeans. The scar on his cheek had faded to a thin white line. He looked tired. Running a legitimate business empire was exhausting work, but his eyes were clear. "Hey," he said, leaning against the counter. "Hey, yourself." She smiled. "We are closed. I know the owner." He grinned. "I think I can get a table." Maya laughed. She walked around the counter, carrying a small, scuffed leather object. "Actually," she said, stopping in front of him, "you left something here." She held up his wallet, the same wallet from the gas station, the wallet that had survived the warehouse. Nico looked at it, then at her. His smile turned soft, reverent. "I thought you might want this back," she said, echoing the words she had spoken in the rain a lifetime ago. Nico took the wallet. He tossed it onto the nearest table without looking at it. He stepped close, his hands settling gently on her waist, pulling her into him. "Keep it," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "I have everything I need right here." Maya looped her arms around his neck. The city outside was still full of shadows. His past would always be a ghost walking 3 steps behind him. But here, in the warmth of the light they had built together, there were no more tests, no more lies, just 2 people who had survived the fire. She kissed him. It was unhurried, a kiss of relief and hard-won trust. She sighed against his lips, and she felt him smile, a rare, relaxed expression that reached his gray eyes. "I love you," the driver said. "I know," the passenger replied, and for the first time in the history of the Vescari family, the story had a happy ending. Thank you so much for listening to She Called to Return a Wallet. Unaware the driver was the mafia boss testing her. It has been a journey writing Nico and Maya's story, from that first rainy night at the gas station to their final moment of peace. I would love to hear your thoughts on their journey. Did you think Nico deserved redemption? Would you have returned the wallet? Please let me know in the comments below, and tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of danger, passion and love against the odds. Until next time, keep reading.